Hi, this is Craig Fraser, and I'm here at the Createx Colors facility in Connecticut. And the video we're going to show you today is going to be, for lack of a better word, Tikifett. Now, everyone here knows who Boba Fett is. What I have here is a Tiki version of Boba Fett. Now, you may have seen resin cast or rotocast sculptures. This one is actually a 3D printed Tiki, and it's done by a good buddy of mine, Walter Codicito. He does the 3D printing for Counts Customs over in Vegas. And this is a PLA printed Tikifett, and I believe it's UV cured. So it's pretty hollow. It's very, very lightweight, very sturdy. And we want to do this video to show how Createx colors and our paints go directly on to 3D printed material, no problem whatsoever. And it works with PLA as well as SLA, which is a resin. This one here is a filament PLA printer. I believe this was done on what's called an artillery sidewinder, possibly an Ender. I'm not sure which one to use. I know he has both those machines, but Walter, thanks a lot for this. And I want to kind of do it in a wood grain fashion, to kind of, because he's got wood grain. If you look at it, you can see the grain that was 3D printed into it, and it hides some of the 3D printing lines. You can almost see some of the printing lines that look like stratified layers. Those are going to go away in the paint. If you really need to make this thing perfectly smooth, which it wasn't designed that way because of the wood grain, you probably need to put a little sealer on top of this and sand it smooth. This is going to be perfect because we want texture in this. I want it to look like an old wood, and we're going to put the colors on like they're almost faded. So it looks like an old Tiki that's been hanging outside on a fence for years. Now, I didn't have to do much prep on this. Matter of fact, all I really did was, it was really in good shape when I got it. I took about some little, I think some 20/20 sandpaper and sanded some of the edges, some of the little bits and pieces here and there on it. And then I'm going to take my towel I've got in my back pocket here and just put a little of the PPG 394 SX. It's a waterborne pre-cleaner. I'm going to use it just to kind of wipe off any fingerprint dust or anything that may be on it. It's already fairly clean. And I'm not worried about the back. I'm just going to be spraying really the top here and then this part in the front, on the bottom. And we're going to spray it with a sealer first. We're not going to spray with a colored sealer. I'm going to use a transparent sealer. It's out of the UVLS line. It's called UVLS 4050. It's a transparent gloss clear. The reason I'm using the gloss is it adheres the best out of all three of the UVLS systems. So I'm going to use the UVLS 4050 as a gloss, as an adhesion promoter. Then I'm going to mix it with the colors to go on top of it. And then I'm going to use the matte version, which is 4052, to go over at the end to just knock it back and make it look like really aged, dried out wood. So let me go ahead and put my mask on, get the booth going, and I'll put a light coat of the sealer directly on here. And just real quick, just to let you guys know what we're doing here, we are using the LPH80 Iwata. It's got the 1.2 nozzle in here, and I already have my 4050 in here with about 10% of the 4011 reducer. Already mixed it and let it sit for 15 minutes. It's always important whenever mixing these products, let them sit for 15 minutes before spraying. You'll be very happy that you did that. So go and get my mask on, get this booth going. We'll put a nice light coat on it, let it dry, and then we'll get to painting this Tiki. Now, all I needed to let it sit was probably an hour or two before painting on it. You know, remember I put the 4050 on top of our 3D print right here. But we actually let it sit overnight because we were doing some other things here, and that's even better. The longer it sits, I mean, up to probably, I'd say 48 hours. After that, it's just not going to get any harder over time. It makes it even more durable to the point where I can wipe this down. You can always wipe it down with a solvent-based pre-cleaner. It's not going to really affect it too much because it's water-based. But even a water-based pre-cleaner, even 4011, which is the reducer I used in the 4015, I can wipe it down and I'm still not going to damage it. Now, if I keep on really scrubbing at it, I'll start lifting it eventually. But I had enough coats of the 4050 down, I'm not really worried. Secondly, I'm using 4050 as a balancing clear for all my colors that are going on this. So even let's say I did get some of that 4050 base adhesion promoter on there a little on the weak side, or maybe I scuffed it off, maybe I sanded or wiped it completely off, I still have it in the paint. So remember, we're doing a triple sandwich here. 4050, colors with 4050, and then final clear 4050. Ultimate sandwich, what we call pinhole free. In other words, pinhole basically means you're completely covering. There's pinhole free coverage. There's nothing left exposed. Now, to do this, you have to kind of figure out a strategy. I got my sealer on here now. Now, I'm going to do the strategic colors of Boba Fett, which this is a bluish green here, this is the darker green here, this is a red, this is silver, there's some yellow and silver here and there, this is black right inside of here. I already know those colors, but I want to do this like a wood grain. So I'm going to do the wood grain first, leaving some of the white showing through, and then I'm going to mask off and spray and distress the colors as I go along to look like it's wood, because you almost have to think of the reality of something when you're painting it. If you're painting something that is wood, the paint's on top of the wood, which means the wood's not going to wear out before the paint does. Paint wears down to the wood. If you think the way something is physically when you're painting it, and you treat it the way it is in reality, it will look more real. You have to start, you're literally fighting nature if you actually try and paint something out of sequence. You know, if I was going to do the wood grain on top of all the color, it wouldn't look as good because the wood grain is not on top of the color, it's underneath. So think of it, reality does come into play even when you're making something pretend. So I've got this, and I want to create a good wood grain texture. Now you could just say, oh, black, but then black's almost too killer. I've got black going in here already. What I want is, what color is wood? It's brown normally, or shades of brown. We have a great color here called Decay, which is one of my favorite colors I use in the Tim Gore. But then again, you're going to hear me use the term favorite in a lot of Tim Gore colors. It's an illustration color, candy black, which I absolutely love for details and for shading. And guess what we got? Our good old friend, Mr. UVLS 4050. So we're going to be using this combined with these two, and I kind of cocktailed it till I got something. You know, the Decay is a great brown, and it's good for all kinds of, from flesh tones all the way to just making something look thrashed and rusted or dirty. But it's a little on the brownish side, and I wanted, of course, you know, but I wanted to push it a little bit black, so I added some candy black to it. Now I already made this mixture over here, and I over-reduced it. I probably added like maybe 20 or 30% reducer to instead of just 10. And I mixed this actually yesterday, and it sat overnight. I forgot to cover it up. You say, oh, it's the worst case. You know, if this was going to go in a spray gun, what I would do is I'd stir it up, maybe add a little bit more reducer if some evaporated, pro it through a strainer, most likely 125 micron. If it had metallic or pearl in it, guess what's going to get? 190 micron strainer. Run it through the strainer, and it'll get out anything that's in there. Now, it's not that big a deal. It's not the end of the world. It's like, oh, it sat out, it's no good, it's all bad, throw it out. That's a waste of paint. I'm not airbrushing this color. I'm brushing it. So I just stirred it up and added some more reducer and called it a day. And that's the color you're getting. It's like it looks almost black, but when it's thinned down, it'll have a brownish texture. You can almost see on the inside of that cup. You can see, that's why I like using transparent cups, because the light can come through and give you like the realistic color you got going on there. And my good old friend, Mr. Chip Brush. If you can't afford to buy a chip brush, you're in the wrong industry, because anything cheaper, and you have to pay to take them off their hands. But you can get these at any hardware store, any paint store. These are the ones that are so neat, they actually leave bristles behind, so they add extra realistic texture. These are the kind of thing that you can clean them, I guess, but when I'm done using them, I kind of throw them out. I always call him the hamster of the airbrush industry, because you know, you don't take the hamster to a vet. You know, if you do, he's just going to go thunk and hand you a new one. So watch, all the hamster lovers are going to be, no! Did you ever wonder why your hamster looked different coming back from the vet? There we go. So I got a little bit of this on the brush. I may decide to thin it out a little bit more, may not. I haven't decided yet. We'll see how this goes. I don't want to get too wet and sloppy, because then it'll just give me solid coverage. It's almost like I want to dry brush it. So I'm going to have a little rag right here. I can kind of kill some of that. And let's try it over here on an area. It's not an inconspicuous surface, but it's an easy area. I want the brush to fill in some of the natural scratches in here. Now, unfortunately, because it's 3D printed, this brush will also find some of the 3D printing striations, which tend to go, they may go in the direction of wood grain, they may actually not. And then you're going to get, because it's a brush, it's going to grab the high edges. I'm creating just a texture effect that I will then emphasize later down the road. I want people to look at it and go, ooh, it's wood grain, but not, you know, all of a sudden have to, you know, oh, well, that's not the proper wood grain. For that tiki, it would normally be made out of palm, therefore it's like, you need to stop right now. Not looking for anyone with a PhD in wood grain. But let's say you get a little bit too much on there. You know what you can do? You can come in. I don't want to use the 40-20. It's a little bit too harsh. but I can come in on this area here and just kind of wipe it. Now you're going to keep a wash on that. It's going to have a little bit of a dinginess to it. You know, I don't want to cover up all of my white with this dingy wash, but I do like the kind of the dinginess it gives me. And the rag helps take some of the excess paint and distribute it. If you really want to be specific on your wood grain, like actually have individual wood grains and knots and whatever, come along and use just a brush. But if I'm doing this right here and this is a palm, you're not going to have knot holes. Knot holes are where branches are. When was the last time I saw a palm that had branches on the trunk? Aha! See? So we'll only use nature when it can benefit your argument. Whenever it's used against you, say, come on, you're being too literal. You'll develop your own technique as you go along. Figure out what you like. Oh, I like this better. Oh, I want to. Oh, I'll remember that next time. I mean, you might be doing something and say, oh my God, this technique is freaking hideous. I hate it. It reminds me of this, something else. And you're like, but then remember that for when you're painting that something else. Like, oh, what was that crap technique? It didn't work on the Tiki. Ooh, might work on this. Come in here. Turn the brush sideways. All we want to do is get rid of that solid white. You may all of a sudden discover a new technique. Oh, I like it when I do this. Don't fall in love with technique. Appreciate it, use it, but you always tell when someone's like, oh, that's neat, and all of a sudden everything for the next 3 years is, ah. Oh God, airbrush artists love that crap. Like, yeah, I remember my first chip brush. Don't go crazy. It's a neat little toy, but it's not sliced bread. A little bit more. The hardest part is this dome area because it's, well, anytime you deal with a convex curve or complex, compound curve, you're dealing with anomalies, and it kind of contradicts where your grain is. Especially when you got a spiral build pattern from this 3D printer. And again, this came from Walter Cosido, a good buddy of mine that works over at Counts Customs, and who also just purchased a 3D printer recently for him from my son's company, Simon Fraser Designs, who is now he's a sponsor of my podcast, but he's also doing a lot of 3D printing for us. Keep an eye out for some cool 3D print stuff coming out from my son. There we go. I'm allowed to plug his company. Got to have a little bit of nepotism in there. All I'm doing now is looking for areas that look like, so I want something that just looks thrashed. But if I have some area that looks specifically like a brush, I want to get rid of that. I want to just kind of create random texture. It's got to look wood grainy. It's also a palm, so it doesn't have, the same specific wood grain as a tree does. I want to have it on the bottom too, even though, now should I do it on the back? What the heck? You always look at things on the back, even though this is never seen, people can be like, oh, he didn't care enough to paint the back. Now people can realize that the reason I painted the back was to make fun of the people that say I didn't care enough to paint the back. Because I didn't care enough to paint the back. But also, as someone looking at the back, it's like that jerk at a car show that's on the ground looking underneath the car. That's something that you didn't do. Those are the guys you actually need to trip over. Oh, I'm sorry, that was your head? Oh. This will get everywhere. Why do you think I wear black? Because I'm a klutz. Kitty's all like, my white paper is covered in paint. That's what it's there for. Now be careful when your paint's still wet. I did it on purpose to teach you people something. See, it's all better. It's all better. Calm down. All you OCD people that just started sweating from their eyes. It's okay. It's all good. You can breathe again. Now, in this situation, I want to see if I screwed up anything else, because that's how I roll. A little bit of air from my airbrush. Get a quick dry on the back. Am I going to paint any more on the back? No, I don't care that much. That's for all the crap talkers. But this also gives me a chance to look at it. Letting it dry, letting it dry. No, I'm not airbrushing. There is reducer, there's no paint in it. Could I have just used the airbrush to spray this and then wiped it all down to create the streaks? Yes, you can, but I like the fact that the brush is an imperfect tool that does not get into all the cracks. So there are a combination of lots of paint, little paint, no paint. That's what you want. I'm pretty happy with that. Now, I am going to be masking on this in order to paint the different colors. The masking tape, this paint's pretty durable, but the masking tape still can lift some of the high spots. And so I want to make sure this is completely dry. So I'm actually going to put this aside and let it sit for about a good hour before I mask on it. Now, you can probably do it for a half an hour, but I actually have some other videos I'm doing, so we'll stick it over to the side and work on the other video. Oh, I saw a spot I missed. See? You always will have a spot you missed. There we go. Cool. So that's our, now you can just leave it like that, except it would kind of suck. But you know, you always want, I learned something from the late great Steve Driscoll. He says, whatever step you do, he goes, all the steps you do in a process, each should stand on their own, but not necessarily have to. So this one looks kind of cool the way it is. Honestly, if I had an old Tiki outside, I have Tikis outside my backyard, they look like this. They're not even painted. But yeah, we're gonna paint this sucker up and that'll be the next step. So see you back in a little bit. Okay, gave this a little bit of time to dry, and if you're not sure about because the next step we're going to mask off and actually paint the red on this, because I had the red already pre-mixed. If you're not sure about it, you're kind of worried, you always heard that thing, test an inconspicuous area, test on our back area that we don't care about. Put some tape on there, yank it up, abuse it, look at the tape. Kind of hard to tell if it's being abused because it's kind of thrashed effect anyway, but really burnish it in. Nothing coming up on the tape at all, so that worked out really good. Very happy with that. But I'm still going to use my my low rouge tape from FBS, which is very, very low tack. I'm not worried about getting any bleeds because just it'll look like it was done on purpose. Now, on doing this, normally if this was a Tiki I was painting, or a Mandalorian helmet, or anything, I would try and strategically figure out how to mask this off so I wouldn't have to mask every single thing separately. I would do like, if I'm painting just the area right here red on the helmet, I would just paint the whole dang thing red and then paint that black later. I don't want to do that this time because I want that wood grain white to show through equally in all of them, which means I can't have any colors overlapping. So this is actually going to take more masking than, let's say, an actual Mandalorian helmet or an actual Boba Fett helmet, because I'm going to mask each color separately. Luckily, there's not a lot of different colors, only 3: red, light bluish green, dark green, and then of course black. So I'm going to keep on going with this red tape, go all the way around it, and you don't need to worry about burnishing this. I'm pressing this down. It's such low tack. I'm really pressing down to make sure it sticks good. Besides being low tack, the red tape, by comparison to some of the other vinyl tapes out there, doesn't leave glue behind. We don't want to leave any glue. And every now and then I'll use a little pencil to kind of press some of the tape down, use the eraser end, or take the lead out and just press it in. The downside with vinyl tapes, when you're going into corners, a lot of times they'll start lifting. So when I come to a corner, I'll not stretch the tape at all. I'll press it in, then I'll go from there, because the vinyl tapes always start shrinking. These are calendared vinyls. If you're wondering the difference between a calendar and a cast vinyl is poured into place, does not shrink. Calendared is stretched. So this kind of tape is always looking to shrink because it was stretched out in the first place. It's always trying to go back to its original shape. So when you hear people use two terms of cast and calendared, that's the difference between them. Tapes are calendared. Now this didn't require any cutting. This one. I am going to come along the bottom. See, I just kind of overlapped it there. And let's make it a little more attractive in case someone actually is peeking underneath your sculpture, your Tiki. And we're just going to go straight across on that. Cap it off. It also holds that tape down. And then on the inside part here, we'll come along. And press it right down in the back. Got a little close there, that's okay. Press it right there, coming around the back and snap it off. That'll work. And then when I come along here, I'm going to have to cut this part because it's on the inside. I can continue all the way over though on this. It'll be a lot easier to mask this off when I'm doing black because I'll be masking on the red. But this part, I'm going to snap that and you'll see how you get a little mixing stick, and I'll press that tape down in the corner there. Do the same thing down here. Then I'll take my blade and very carefully cut right across there. Boop. No big deal. Easy peasy. Same thing on this side. Use my stick. I like this stick better. Use my stick here, press it down, get it nice and pressed and burnished. It's another reason why you want to do a little test to make sure your paint's not going to lift because you're doing a lot of burnishing on this tape. And then one across the top. And now on this side, snap it, press it in. And there we go. All we have to do now is bring in the yellow tape, which I'll use to, let me press this, so the guy needs to get pressed down here. He's starting to lift on me, you saw that? Tape loves to lift in those inside corners. So we're going to help it stay down by, as soon as you press it down, we nail it down with this yellow tape, which does not stretch. You'll see me, if I'm laying out flames on something, after I lay the flames all out with like a blue or a red vinyl tape, I'll come and put a little piece of tape at the tip of each flame. It prevents the tips from peeling back. This tape is your anchor tape. It's also your base tape for putting paper up against. I will not be papering this Tiki because that would just be freaking silly. That's why they don't make, 2-inch tape machines. There's so little to mask off. I'll just use tape. Also, I'm not that worried about mass overspray because I'm using my airbrush. I'm not using the spray gun on this one. And of course, I gotta mask the inside of this too. Luckily, hey, look at that. 3/4 fits right down the center of that, so that made our job there a lot easier. Whenever I attempt to lay out designs, I try and keep them all within 1/2 inch, 3/4, 1/4, and 1/8, because that's all the sizes of my tapes. It's not called being lazy, it's called not wasting time. There's a difference. And then I'm going to lightly score. Now when I'm cutting this tape, I'm cutting on the the red vinyl. Reason being is, the odds of it going through the vinyl as well and cutting everything underneath is pretty remote. Oh, I got to press this guy down. He lifted a little bit and he's not cut yet. Got to press these guys down. There we go. So you get the general idea. I'm going to go ahead and finish this up and get it finished taped, and we're going to come in and paint our red on the Tikifett. Got this sucker all masked up with the yellow tape, and did I mask every inch of it? No, why? I don't care. You don't need to. Now, in this situation, would it be best if I came in and just used the chip brush and did a dip paint technique and did it? That's tempting because it gives you that cool thrashed brush look, but if I want to get fast coverage, the airbrush works out really good, and I can always scuff away areas. The reason I'm not going to use the brush is the brush kind of either it paints or it doesn't paint. And the dry brushing is really kind of in between, very small. What I mean by it paints, it's wet paint. And that wet paint is going to go underneath those edges, and I'll get all kinds of bleeds at the corners. So it's much easier to do with the airbrush and to spray dry with the airbrush. Now, the color I made for this is actually the same color I did for a Boba Fett helmet that we're doing a video right now on. And it is a combination of the LVS 450, the coagulated crimson and blood red, which is Tim Gore's Bloodline paint system, and the decay from Tim Gore and the candy black. Makes a nice red that's kind of dirty, dingy, thrashed. We're not going to be doing all the scuffs and scrapes on this Tiki helmet that you would see on a metal helmet, but we're still going to make it look pretty thrashed. So I've got that already loaded in this airbrush, and I'm going to come in and see how it sprays. Make sure it's spraying first. There we go. And spray in a little of this, and I'm going to do it in a streaky pattern that kind of mimics the direction the wood grain is in anyway in it. I'm also going to make sure I get it in the corners of those areas too, which remember, it's really tough to get in there with the brush. I was having to really hit it hard. Now with the airbrush, because you can spray it gradated, you will kind of get some areas that are pink, and I don't really want pink. So you have to kind of hit it hard. You're hammering with this brush. Also why I'm using the Eclipse and not the Micron or the HPC. I'm going to do half of it, and I'll show you how we're going to come in. Actually, that's pretty good. I'm going to do the whole thing. It's so dang small. At the bottom there, come up. Make some areas really, really dark, some areas not, which will make it look like the paint has different layers of erosion. You know, the paint's slowly getting worn away by time, whatever, rain, bad application, who knows. And I got really wet down there. Be careful in those wet, because that can blow underneath the tape also. But it won't. It's not as bad as the brush. And then I'm just blowing air right now. No paint, just air. Make it dry. Seeing if I missed anything also, holding it. Another nice thing is that 3D printer, if this was just solid resin or resin cast, it'd be 4 or 5 times the weight of this. This thing, I'm not kidding, weighs, this roll of tape weighs more than this Tiki does. And unlike wood, if this was wood, it'd be absorbing a lot faster right now. It's not wood. This is PLA plastic. Now, for all you 3D printers out there, don't start giving me a grill like, oh, what kind of PLA is that? I mean, I've talked to my son about that. He's the one that knows about those things. Our Walter, he knows. I know just enough to get in trouble. Story of my life. Okay, now in some cases I don't want this totally dry when I'm going to Scotch Brite it, because I kind of want to streak and kind of screw up. But by doing this, I can kind of scrape down to some of the white underneath, kind of give it a worn, thrashed look. And if I scrape too much, come back later with the paint, redo it a little bit. And I do want the edges to be a little bit more hammered. Why? Because that's where the whir would be. If people are handling this or touching it, they're going to hit the edges. The edges will be more thrashed and more worn. I'm going to do one really, really hard. See how far I can go down on that. I went pretty far down on that, a little bit more than I want to, so all you need to do is, you can also come in, if you want to give some extra erosion, stipple it. See? Pull the trigger on the airbrush and it makes it splatter. And this can make it look like whoever painted it just didn't really give a rip either. I mean, just thrashed. Or it could just be, you know, junk and corrosion, who knows. Now this paint dries darker than it looks when it's wet, and it's a combination of reasons, just because it's a matte, so it's always going to look, when it's wet, look brighter, but also it's got a candy in it. It's got a candy black in it, and that candy black will float to the surface while it's drying sometimes, separate out, get a little bit of a blackish tone to it, and I kind of like that. I like those little stipples and screw ups, that's nice. And then just let it dry. As soon as it dries, I'll unmask that. I'm going to let that sit, because I got some areas really, really wet on this and some really heavy droplets. If you've got a fan or a booth, you can leave it in the booth. Just have a fan just sitting on it. Don't use heat for two reasons. With water-based paint, heat's never a good idea. I mean, you don't want cold, but we're talking don't blast heat on it because it dries the outside and traps the moisture. Another reason you don't want heat is this thing was made on a 3D printer. The way it works is it melts. It's like a glorified computerized glue gun. You know, it's melting the filament. So heat can damage the PLA in many situations. This is a very high heat PLA, so it would take a heck of a lot of heat. Still don't want to push it. So just let the air, you know, just a little suitcase fan or just small fan, just sit it off this side and let it blow. It will dry 5 times faster with a small fan on it than it will, and don't sit it in the sun. That's just a bad idea. So, but you can get a good look. That kind of has a cool weathered look, and you saw it didn't take much. Just airbrushed it and stippled it and then scuffed it with a little piece of Scotch-Brite pad. So as soon as it's dry, we'll unmask it and go on to the next color.